Most people dream of moving to Costa Rica and end up buried in research and never actually make the leap. I've seen it and lived it myself. So today I'm going to be giving you the exact 90-day step-by-step plan to get your finances, paperwork, and life in order so that you can finally turn your decision into reality. So in the last video, I showed you what happens after you decide to move abroad and how to stabilize that decision and stop carrying it all in your head. And today I'm going to give you that structure that I promised. So if you're watching this and thinking, I need help figuring out where I actually stand, I built a free assessment called Are You Actually Ready to Move Abroad? And that's linked in the description below. This is a real framework that you can start this week. And this is my experience with working with families relocating overseas with kids, or retirees, or professionals across the board. And the difference between the people who actually make this move and the people who are still thinking about it 3 years later almost never comes down to money. It comes down to structure. The people who land well, they didn't have more courage. They didn't have more savings. They had a container for the complexity, a sequence, a way to take the 200 questions swirling around in their head and turn them into a series of manageable decisions with deadlines. So think about it like this. It's like packing a suitcase. If you try to shove everything in at once, it's chaos. But if you organize by category, clothes here, toiletries here, and use vacuum seal bags, suddenly it all fits. And the people who stall, they treat the move like the one giant decision instead of just a series of smaller ones. And that's what creates paralysis. So here's what I want to do for you today. I'm going to walk you through that exact 90-day framework that my family used when we made this move. And it's broken into 3 phases: foundation, integration, and optimization. And by the end, you'll know exactly what needs to happen and in what order. If you're thinking about retiring in Costa Rica or relocating your family, this is the part that's going to save you months of spinning your wheels. So before we get into that 90-day framework, I need you to sit with a question that most people skip over entirely. Can you actually afford this move? I'm not asking whether Costa Rica is cheaper than the US. In many ways, it can be. I'm asking whether your specific financial picture, your savings, your income, and any changes to that income that may come with this move that can actually support this transition. Because here's what I've seen. People get excited about the lifestyle, they start researching residency visas and neighborhoods, and they skip right past the financial foundation. And then somewhere around day 45, reality hits. The money conversation they avoided becomes a crisis that stalls everything. So let me give you a quick formulation for thinking about this. First, the move itself has cost. Flights, shipping or replacing belongings, temporary housing, legal fees for residency, setting up new accounts, these aren't invisible. But depending on your family size and how much you're bringing, the transition itself can run anywhere between $3,000 and $30,000 or more before you paid a single month of rent. And that's before any residency deposit or investment requirements, which can range from $60,000 to $150,000 depending on your visa pathway. Second, think about your income. Is your income staying the same? So if you're remote and you're keeping your job, that's one scenario. If you're retiring on a pension and drawing from your investments, that's another. And if your income is going to change if you're leaving a job, starting something new, or shifting to a part-time one, you need to know what that gap looks like and how long your savings can bridge it. And then third, understand your ongoing burn rate. Your monthly cost of living in Costa Rica depends heavily on where you live, how you live, and what trade-offs you're willing to make. So a family of 4 can live well in many parts of the country on $3,000 to $5,000 a month, but what living well looks like varies. Central Valley versus a beach town, international school versus local, or homeschooling, these choices swing your budget significantly. And the point isn't that you have to have a perfect number right now. The point is to be honest with yourself about whether the math works at least roughly before you start the 90-day clock. So grab a sheet of paper, jot down your estimated moving costs and your expected income, your ideal monthly spend. Even rough numbers will show if you're on solid ground or if you need to pause before you even start packing. Because a 90-day plan built on a financial foundation that you haven't examined isn't a plan, it's a hope. And a hope is not a strategy for moving your family to another country. So if you're not sure where you stand financially, or if you think you know, but you want someone to stress test it, that's exactly what I do. As a certified financial planner who specializes in cross-border transitions to Costa Rica, I help families map out the true cost of this move against their real financial picture. Their savings, income, investments, taxes, all of it. A plan built around your specific financial situation. So there's a link in the description below to book a short call with me. Just clarity on whether the numbers work so you can move forward with confidence instead of anxiety. Now that we're grounded in financial reality, let's talk about why the 90 days is the right time frame, because that number is not arbitrary. This number is based off of a real life metric of how long it took for my family to plan our transition, make the move, and then get settled in Costa Rica. So this is based on real experiences and measurable data, not just idealistic hopes and dreams. 90 days is a long enough time to restructure your cash flow, understand the real cost of living in Costa Rica, not the blog post version, but your actual daily costs in colones and dollars. It takes about a month of tracking. And 90 days gives you a full month of data collection, a month to adjust, and a month to lock in systems that work. And here's the part that matters most. 90 days is long enough to be thorough, but short enough to maintain that momentum. It creates a healthy urgency without panic. It's entirely possible to achieve. So let's get into it. 3 phases, 30 days each, clear deliverables at the end of every phase so you know if you're on track. So stay with me through all 3 phases. Phase 3 is where most people's plans completely fall apart, and I'll show you why. So phase 1 is foundation, and that word matters. You're not taking action for the sake of action. You're building a base that everything else sits on. There are 5 tracks running simultaneously in this first month. Paperwork, financial setup, housing, family needs, and pre-departure logistics. The long lead items take the most time and cause the most problems if you delay. So let me walk through each one. Track 1, the paperwork spread. This is where far too many people procrastinate, and it's the one area where procrastination actually costs you time and money. So assuming you're going for temporary residency, get your core documents and have them apostilled before you actually leave the United States. That means birth certificates, marriage license, and FBI background checks. These documents are required for every residency pathway in Costa Rica, whether you're going the pensionado route, the rentista route, the digital nomad, or the investor visa. And if you're a family, that's documents for every family member. If your kids are born in different states, that's potentially different processing timelines. So start this on day 1, not day 25 or 45. Then you also want to book a consultation with the Costa Rica residency attorney in this first month. Not to file yet, but to choose your path, to understand it. Because the residency pathway that you select affects your financial planning and your timeline, and your tax obligations. So for the investor visa, for example, you're looking at a $150,000 investment. For the pensionado, you might need $1,000 per month from a qualifying pension, or potentially more if you're coming here with your family. And these aren't just legal details, they are financial architecture decisions. And making them early means that everything else downstream is cleaner. And while you're at it, make sure everyone's passports are current and have 1 to 2 years of validity. So if anyone does need a passport, get the appointment handled in the first week, as it can take up to 8 weeks for your passport to arrive. So for my family of 4, it only took us 3 weeks to receive 2 renewed passports and 2 new passports for our children. But that's still a 21-day wait. During this time, you should also be gathering your medical and dental records, school transcripts for the kids, financial records that you need access to while you're abroad. And please, make physical and digital copies of everything critical, and keep a set in your carry-on luggage when travel day arrives. Digital backups in the cloud are great, but when you're standing in a government office in San Jose, a printed copy is worth its weight in gold. And a quick note, if you're watching this and thinking which residency path is right for me, I'll have a dedicated video on that soon, breaking down the benefits and implications of each path. For now, just know that choosing your path is a day 1 to 30 priority, not a day 60 afterthought. Then we have track 2, financial setup. So here's where my world as a financial planner intersects with the reality of moving to another country. Your U.S. financial life was built for the U.S. Your bank accounts, your investment accounts, your credit cards, your tax withholdings, all this was designed for someone living domestically. So when you move abroad, that infrastructure doesn't automatically translate. So in the first 30 days, you want to identify multi-currency accounts with the ability to hold both U.S. dollars and Costa Rican colones without getting eaten alive by conversion fees. If you're opening a Costa Rica bank account when you actually get here, you may be limited on how much you can transfer at any given time, or be required to have your finances vetted by a Costa Rican accountant to clear the legality of the funds. And one key is to work with a bank that does not have ATM fees like Schwab or other online bank. And critically, you want to audit your existing U.S. accounts. Make sure that you have online access that works internationally. Make sure your 2-factor authentication isn't tied to a phone number you're about to lose or device that you might be selling. I've seen people get locked on their own brokerage accounts from overseas because they didn't update a phone number or they didn't update an address. And that's the kind of thing that's trivial to fix now, a nightmare to fix when you're in another country. This is also where expat tax planning starts. Not the heavy lifting, but just awareness. So you need to understand that as a U.S. citizen or resident, you file and pay U.S. taxes regardless of where you live. And moving to Costa Rica doesn't change that. What it changes is the complexity. You need to know about the FBAR or the FATCA reporting requirements for foreign accounts. And you need to start thinking about whether foreign earned income exclusion or foreign tax credit will apply to your situation. And getting ahead of that complexity now, even at a basic level, prevents expensive surprises later. And if you're approaching the retirement age, this is also when you want to start making your Medicare and international healthcare decisions. Now we have track 3, housing, both sides of the move. So some of these decisions might require visits to Costa Rica, so start early. First, your current housing. If you're renting, review your lease and determine what costs will be incurred if you terminate early, or what the end of lease notice requirements are. And if you own a house, you have the choice between renting it out and paying your mortgage. And that's if your mortgage and Costa Rican rent is affordable, or you're going to have to list it for sale. And if you plan to sell, finding a realtor and getting it listed needs to be a day one activity, as houses in the current market are on for 60 to 90 days in some places, and sometimes over 100. So I recommend finding a realtor who offers full move-out services who can work with you remotely, so you don't have to postpone your actual transition if things take longer than expected. And on the Costa Rica side, begin researching temporary housing, not your forever home. A furnished rental that gives you 30 to 90 days that gives you a stable base while you orient yourself. Are you wanting to live in the city, close to the beach, near a certain school? Do you have a strict budget or other location preferences? So this search process may require visits to the country or connections to an on-the-ground realtor who you can trust that can vet all those properties for you. And please resist the urge to commit to anything long-term at first. Your initial living experience is for observing. And that said, if you have time to visit and find a place that you really like that would be available within your timeline, I suggest that you lock it in quick because rentals go quick. It can be unclear when comparable units will become available. Now, track 4, family-specific planning. So if you have children, education research starts now. Not in phase 2, not when you arrive, now. International schools, bilingual schools in Costa Rica often have annual enrollment deadlines and potentially wait lists. So if you're targeting a specific school, and if education is a driver of your move, then you need to understand their admissions timeline, required documents, and available spots. So get your school transcripts gathered and translated if needed. And if you're a retiree, this phase is about mapping out the nearest hospitals, your specialists in your target area, and starting to think intentionally about your social connections and your purpose. What does your daily life look like? What communities are you going to plug into? And don't leave this to chance. And if you're a remote worker, confirm your internet reliability in your area. This sounds basic, but it's deal-breaking because internet and electricity goes out fairly often here. So research co-working spaces or workspace options, and make sure your employer or clients are aware of your relocation and that there are no contractual or tax issues. Then we have track 5, pre-departure logistics. Phase 1 is also when you begin the pre-departure groundwork, and that takes longer than people think. So set up a virtual mailbox service in the U.S. or transition your residency to a family home that you'll occupy when you return to the U.S. Because your U.S. address matters for banking, taxes, and legal correspondence, and you'll need a reliable way to receive and forward mail. So services like a virtual mailbox can scan your mail and let you manage it digitally from anywhere. So for your phone number, you can set up a Google Voice or similar voice over IP services to maintain a U.S. phone number or use an international plan. And this is critical for two-factor authentication, banking verification, and staying reachable by U.S. institutions. And some carriers automatically have international plans allowed for data and text, but phone calls for some of them can cost like 20 cents a minute. And if you don't have a WhatsApp account, make one right now. I'm serious, make one right now. Because most of the country, friends, businesses, mail services, they all run on WhatsApp. And then if you have pets, start the clearance process now. Moving your pets abroad is entirely possible, and Costa Rica is one of the more relaxed countries when it comes to animal entrances. But you have to do your due diligence. Find a USDA-approved vet and discuss your timeline. Your pet will need initial screening, updated vaccinations, and a final pre-flight certificate that must be issued within 10 to 14 days of departure. And this process can cost anywhere from $500 to $2,000. And I know that final window is tight, and so getting everything done early helps give you breathing room. And lastly, any final medical and dental appointments for your whole family. Get those prescriptions refilled, stock up on any necessary medications, and especially anything that might be harder to source or differently formulated in Costa Rica. So 30 deliverables. So by the end of phase 1, here's what should be true. Your document folder is complete and everything should be in process for your apostles. Also, you should have physical copies made of your document. You got to make sure your residency attorney is engaged and your pathway is selected if you're wanting to stay here longer than 180 days. Then you have your current housing is being phased out and temporary housing in Costa Rica is being researched. If you have family, schools are being researched and enrollment timelines are understood if this is applicable. And then next, your permanent U.S. address is planned or set up and your U.S. phone number is set up. Make sure pet visits are scheduled or underway. And that's foundation. It's not glamorous, but every family I've worked with who did this phase well tells me it's the reason that the rest of the move felt manageable. So we're about to move to phase 2. And this is where the transition starts to feel real. So if you're finding this useful, do me a favor, hit subscribe so you don't miss the deeper dives on each of these topics that are coming. Phase 2 is integration. The shift over these next 30 days is subtle, but very important. In phase 1, you were setting things up. Phase 2, you're committing, you're packing, you're preparing to actually leave. And the training wheels start to come off. You have moving logistics. What comes and what stays. Figure out what you're taking with you, how you're getting it there, and what you need to rebuy after arrival. The easiest route is what you can bring in suitcases and take with you on the flight down. So my family of 4, we made our move with 12 pieces of luggage. But there are other options like shipping containers and air freight. However, it's very important to know that Costa Rica imposes hefty duties and import taxes on goods, 30 to 37% of goods value. And vehicles are taxed even more aggressively, so anywhere from 52 to nearly 80%. And this isn't US value, this is Costa Rica value. It's different. If you choose to ship one in, start thinking about what comes and what stays. Get quotes on the freight options and calculate the duties and taxes. It might be cheaper to sell and rebuy depending on those numbers. And this was true for our family. We bought some must-have larger items like my must-have pizza oven. I make pizza every week. Regardless of what you choose, if you're wanting to stick to a fast timeline, hire a moving service to pack and remove or store your possessions. Please declutter aggressively. Sell or donate what isn't worth the cost or hassle moving, because this phase is about making hard decisions, not postponing them. You may find the experience of clearing your house incredibly free. I know I certainly did, as my family did this. And then we have to look at flights and temporary accommodation. So right now, go book your flights. Choose your date. This sounds obvious, but it's a commitment point. This makes everything real. So if you haven't locked in your temporary housing in Costa Rica, yet now is the time that you need to. So you ideally need a place that you're going to be able to land into that's furnished in your target area that gives you a base for 30 to 90 days. And if you're arriving with pets, book pet-friendly flights and confirm those airline-specific policy. Then you need to coordinate your pet's final visit with the 10-day pre-departure window. Phase 2 is when you make your transportation decision. Are you going to buy a vehicle in Costa Rica? Import one. Rent long-term. Use taxis or buses. Car imports come with those significant taxes that I mentioned with 50% or more of the vehicle's value. And that's a financial decision that deserves real analysis, not a gut call. So phase 2 is when you run those numbers, compare those options, and make an informed choice. Even if you have a great vehicle that you'd like to bring, is it well suited for the roads of Costa Rica? Lifted vehicles are almost a mandatory, with 4x4s being the preference. Something low to the ground might make excursions to the grocery store rather difficult. So if you choose to buy a vehicle in Costa Rica, start looking at usados, used lots where they likely will have English-speaking sales reps, or join online WhatsApp auto sales groups where individuals can list vehicles that they have for sale. You'll want to be in person to see the vehicles and potentially with a mechanic on your side. So be prepared to rent a vehicle for a week or two so that you can have time to shop around, and be prepared to be shocked by used car prices, because I know that I was. Cars are crazy expensive here. Now we move on to insurance and healthcare decisions. So along with transportation, you're also making healthcare decisions in this phase. So if your residency pathway requires CAHA enrollment in the national healthcare system, you need to understand what that process is like and what the cost is going to be. And if you're going to be pricing out some supplemental private health insurance, which a lot of expat families do choose to have alongside CAHA, since it is a little bit faster access and generally English-speaking providers. Though, you do not have to register for CAHA until your residency application is approved. Additionally, some people choose to go without health insurance since the costs are far less. And beyond health insurance, you're also evaluating other local insurance products. Auto, property, liability. The insurance landscape in Costa Rica is different than the US. It's primarily a government monopoly through INS, I-N-S. It's opened up, but there are other options out there that are private, and it's going to look different than what you're used to. Most people just use ends. Healthcare is one of those topics that generates an enormous amount of anxiety for people considering this move. And I'll be honest, it's usually less complicated than people expect once you're actually in it. But the key is making the decision in phase 2, not phase 3. You don't want to be optimizing your financial plan while simultaneously scrambling for insurance coverage. And now we need to look at pre-departure administration. This is the tedious but critical work of untangling your U.S. life. So 1, cancel or transfer those subscriptions, memberships, and services that you don't need. I promise you're going to save a lot of money here. Switch all accounts to electronic delivery, no more paper statements, going to the address that you won't be at. If necessary, notify your banks and credit card issuers of your move so they don't flag Costa Rica transactions as fraud. Most places don't need this, but some still do. Next, set up recurring bill payments and make sure your U.S. financial obligations, student loans, insurance premiums, and ongoing commitments are on autopay. You don't want to be managing U.S. payment deadlines from a different time zone with unreliable internet. So day 60 deliverables. By the time you're at the end of phase 2, you decided what stays, what goes, your move-out plan is in motion. Your flights are booked, and your temporary housing is secured. Your transportation decision is planned. Your healthcare decision is made. U.S. services are canceled or transferred or set to autopilot. Your pet travel logistics are confirmed. You're not just planning anymore. You're starting to prepare to actually live abroad. In phase 3 is where I see the most costly mistakes. The things that people think they can put off, but absolutely cannot. So don't skip ahead because the sequence matters. Phase 3 is optimization. And I want to be clear by what I mean by that word. I don't mean squeezing out the extra percentage points. I mean making sure that the infrastructure you built actually holds. This phase happens largely on the ground in Costa Rica. And this is where most DIY plans fall apart. People get through the first 60 days on adrenaline and good intentions, and then they hit things they don't know about. So the first part is cash flow and tax systems. Start a cost of living tracker if you don't already have one. Not an estimate, but actual numbers. What you spend on groceries, utilities, transportation. The cost of living in Costa Rica varies dramatically by region, by lifestyle, and by how much you're willing to adapt. But the only way to know your real number is to track it while you're in the States, because honestly, the costs are pretty similar here in Costa Rica. I've tracked every penny of my spending through an Excel spreadsheet, and I don't recommend anyone be as crazy as I am. So the easiest way that you can track all of your spending and account balances in one place is by using something like Monarch Money. And you can use my link in the description to get 50% off in your first year and get real clarity when you make the move. Now, I'm not paid for this. I just have been using this for the past 3 or 4 years now. So in optimization, you're calibrating your withdrawal schedule to match expenses, spend and clonus. You're setting up automatic transfers so money moves predictably instead of reactively. You're starting a simple system that tracks those expenses separately from your U.S. financial life. And this is the difference between families who feel financially calm 6 months in and families who feel like they're constantly putting out fires. The system matters more than the numbers. One of the things that most people don't think about is what's your actual foreign exchange exposure. So if most of your assets are in US dollars, but your daily expenses are in colones, you're carrying currency risk, whether you realize it or not. In phase 3 is when you decide. Do you want to hedge, hold a colones reserve, or accept the exposure? You're also coordinating with your US CPA and potentially a Costa Rican accountant if you're earning here locally, which you cannot earn here locally unless you have permanent residency or work permit, or you have a corporation, which is a whole different topic. And then you have to have estimated tax payments. And as I mentioned before, you need to have foreign account reporting. So you have FBAR and FATCA requirements, and these aren't optional. They're federal requirements with real penalties for noncompliance. I just read an article about a family that was fined $2 million, and that's about all the money they have because over the past 20 years, they didn't file it. And the IRS is getting more serious about this. So most general practice CPAs in the US aren't fluent with cross-border situations. So this is the phase where you need to make sure that your tax team is actually equipped for your life. So I work with a CPA who specializes in US expats. And Costa Rica operates under a territorial tax system, meaning foreign sourced income is generally excluded from taxation. But if you're earning income from Costa Rican sources, the rules change. And this is important if you plan on starting a business here or a corporation that brings in income, which is technically possible, but this is where you need to talk to an attorney. So understand where you fall and plan accordingly. Next is estate and asset protection. This is the one that surprises people. You need a Costa Rican will or a trust. because your U.S. estate plan does not govern assets here in Costa Rica. If you own property, if you have bank accounts, if you have any assets held under Costa Rican jurisdiction, you need a local will that aligns with your U.S. estate plan because the Costa Rica system is entirely different. For example, a will says that you leave everything to your spouse. But here in Costa Rica, if you have your parents that are still alive, even if you're a grown adult, they may get a say. So you also want to evaluate legal structure. A Costa Rican corporation is usually the default vehicle for property ownership and vehicle ownership. And the rules have changed over the past years of what makes sense and depends on your specific situation. Rental income, business activity, liability exposure. For example, for the inversionista visa, which is the investor visa, it's far easier to hold everything in your name, your own personal name, but it also carries risks. So one point is that if you hold it in your spouse's and your name, you'll need $300,000 to qualify. So just keep that in mind. And this isn't about complexity for its own sake. It's about making sure that your family is protected in both jurisdictions. It's the kind of cross-border coordination that falls through the cracks when people try to piece it all together on their own. Now we have on-the-ground setup. This is probably towards the last 10 days of the plan. When you get here, once you've landed, there's a series of practical setup tasks that need to happen beyond getting to your rental place and picking up a car and then heading to wherever you're staying for that night, which if you're flying in at 1 a.m., I highly recommend just booking a hotel for that night. That's what we did. Trust me, you don't want to be driving on these roads at night. And depending on your rental agreement, you may be required to pay for or set up local utilities, electric, water, internet, and internet reliability varies significantly by area. So if you're a remote worker, test your connection early and have a backup plan. And also, you need to get a local phone number or a SIM card. Many services and accounts in Costa Rica, especially bank accounts, require a Costa Rican number. And these plans can be as little as $22 a month. You can use AirAllo. We personally chose Claro, where we can get a normal phone plan rather than a prepaid one. Now that you have the number, now is the time to open up a bank account. So find the bank that's going to be able to work with you. You can use BAC, you can use Banco Nacional, the variety of them, but some of them are going to have different requirements. So make sure you find that out before you actually go. And please book an appointment. Book it in advance because you'll be waiting for 3 hours if you don't. Next is finding a doctor, a dentist, and a pharmacy that you trust. And these relationships matter more than you think when you're in a new country. And to be honest, word of mouth is the most reliable way to find people and services that you can trust. So, building your local advisory team. By day 90, you should have what I call the local bench in place. A Costa Rican attorney, a local accountant, if necessary, if you have a corporation, a doctor that you trust, and potentially even a vet if you have pets. And this isn't a luxury, it's infrastructure. And when something unexpected happens, and something always will, you want to be able to pick up the phone and message someone, not start Googling from scratch. And here's the part that doesn't show up on any checklist. Community immersion. Find a language tutor, local association, or clubs, the parent group at your kid's school, the neighbor who knows which mechanic is honest. This is what turns relocation into actual life. And it's what makes this move sustainable over the long term, not just survival. We have day 90 deliverables. So by the end of phase 3, your financial plan is reconciled with your Costa Rican data. Your estate documents are in process to be updated for both jurisdictions. Your tax reporting is set up with a qualified cross-border CPA. You have your local utilities, banking, and phone operational, and your local support team is in place. You have emergency contingencies established, and your lifestyle routines are established, and your family's settling in. It's not the end, that's the beginning, but it's the beginning with a foundation. It's not a prayer with a plane ticket. I want to address a question that I know some of you are asking right now. Is 90 days really enough? So here's my experience. No plan survives contact with reality perfectly. Believe me, I know. Things will shift, timelines will flex, and a deadline or document's going to take longer. The 90 days isn't a guarantee that everything will be done and in place. It's a guarantee that you're going to know where you stand. You'll have a structure instead of chaos, and that's what helps you adapt instead of react. Because here's what I believe. You don't need to have confidence to make this move. You need structure. Confidence comes with having walked through the process, not from having it all figured out in advance. And the people who actually land well in Costa Rica are the ones who build a life, not just a vacation that just went too long. They're the ones who took it seriously enough to plan and flexible enough to adapt. And that's what this framework gives you. At the top of this video, I told you the difference between people who move and people who stall isn't courage or money, it's structure. Now you have that structure. 3 phases, 90 days, clear deliverables at each stage. And the question isn't whether you can do this. The question is, when does that 90 days start for you? And if you want to complete the 90-day transition checklist I referenced in this video, every deliverable, every milestone, organized by its phase, that's going to be in the description too for a free download. And so what I want to ask you to do is drop a comment below and tell me which phase are you in right now. Are you in day 1, 45, still at day 0? I read every comment and I will answer your questions. And if you're struggling with everything stuck in your head, watch this video next, and I'll see you there.